Hello BookTube. For this Tag Tuesday, I'm going to be doing the Atwood Adventure Tag. This tag was created by Bookworm Adventure Girl, and I originally saw it on Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff, and I will leave links to both original videos in the show notes down below. Prompt number 1. Before publishing her first collection of poetry in the early 60s, Margaret Atwood had several other jobs, including working at summer camps. What was your first job? My first job was in the dorm office of my dormitory at university. I qualified for work study, and I took a position as one of, I think there were three of us, who worked in the dorm office. We cleaned the office, we posted up flyers and passed flyers around, we answered the phone, we opened the door, and directed occasionally the pizza man wherever he needed to go, and we kind of did rounds, that sort of thing. And I worked the job from about halfway through the fall semester and all of the spring semester. And then I moved from the dorms into an off-campus apartment my sophomore year. So from there, I didn't really work on campus. But anyway, I rather enjoyed it. I started off with the the early afternoon shift, the first shift, and then gradually started taking the middle shift and a later shift, particularly on the Friday and Saturday night when my colleagues would really prefer going out instead of sitting in the office doing homework. So anyway, I kind of enjoyed it overall. Anyway, prompt number 2. While growing up, Margaret Atwood's family spent several months each year living in the bush in northern Ontario. What is a survival skill that you have that would help you survive living off the grid? Absolutely none. I have absolutely no survival skills at all. So I would be kind of screwed if I ever had to live off grid. Although I think there's a few books that kind of help with that. But I don't remember what they are because I think I booted them from my Libris wish list ages ago. Anyway, moving on to prompt number 3. Margaret Atwood grew up reading comic books. Awesome. Do you have a favorite comic book or comic book character? So I read comic books as a kid and intermittently since then. I grow out of comic books, but I've never really quite give them up, so I come back to them. I sort of flip-flop. At the moment, except for manga, I don't actively collect American superhero comic books, although I do check them out from my local library and obviously Kindle Unlimited. So my favorite comic books are Spider-Man and the X-Men, or series. Particularly, I really loved Spider-Man when I was a kid. I thought, up until the Clone Saga, or one of the Clone Sagas, the Spider-Man series, it was great. I loved it. I really connected to Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But when I kind of sort of came back to comics in the early 2010s, I wasn't as interested in Spider-Man anymore. There have been a lot of changes in Spider-Man comics that I'm not particularly fond of. The biggest one being Brand New Day, a horrendous storyline in which Peter Parker makes a deal with Beasto to save Aunt May's life, and in so doing, he sacrifices his marriage to Mary Jane. The purpose of this storyline was basically to break him and Mary Jane up. Even though the marriage of Peter Parker and Mary Jane I grew up with that. That was when I got into comics as a kid. That's what I knew. I know Peter Parker married to Mary Jane. Anyway, and the X-Men. I loved the X-Men when I was a kid, and I still largely do. Although, again, there have been ups and downs. As I think all long-running comic book series do. There are really great runs, and then there are really terrible runs. Unfortunately, I think some of the X-Men's terrible runs happened while I was not reading comic books at the time. So, and my favorite superhero is Wiccan. He's a member of the Young Avengers, a group of young heroes who have connections to the Avengers. In this case, Wiccan and his twin brother Speed are kind of, sort of, the children of the Scarlet Witch in a very roundabout, soap opera-y comic book way. He has the power of reality warping, along with some electrokinesis and other powers. And I think he really should have a lot more attention paid to him than he does. He should be in a lot more books, as well as the Young Avengers. I think I ranted a few videos ago about really the Young Avengers should have been nearly 200 issues by now, and not the 36 or 40 that they actually got. Anyway, frustrating. Okay. And I'm also quite fond of Tim Drake, the third Robin. He's the Robin I grew up with. I collected quite a few of his solo run, which was fantastic, I thought. Anyway, moving on to prompt number 4. Margaret Atwood is not only a poet and author, she has also illustrated books and shown her creativity in so many other ways. What are some ways that you are creative? I write myself as well as I paint. I paint with pastels. They are little sticks of pigment that you can paint and draw with. I'm a pretty good beginner. I don't practice. I don't paint nearly enough to really get good at it. And oftentimes, some of my paintings come together despite my incompetence. It's a miracle how they come out. I did some painting last week when I had my little issue, so that was pretty positive. Quite liked how those paintings came out. So that's what I do. I would like to try to draw to illustrate, but I'm not a very good drawer, and I need to really work on that if I want to get better at it. But anyway, moving on to prompt number 5. Some of Margaret Atwood's writing is inspired by myth, folktale, and fairy tales. What is your favorite myth, folktale, or fairy tale, and why? I'm quite fond of the Descent of Inanna. So, for some reason, Inanna, she's the Sumerian goddess of sex and war, and one day she decided she wanted to go conquer the underworld, which is ruled by her older sister. I think she's her older sister, Ereshkigal. So as Inanna marches on the underworld, the demons who guard the gates of the underworld basically strip Inanna of her clothing, which also acts as her power. So by the time Inanna gets to her sister, Inanna is powerless and humiliated, and Ereshkigal just kills her and imprisons her in the underworld until eventually one of Inanna's servants causes enough ruckus that the gods decide that Inanna needs to come back. So they send a deputation down to the underworld to get Inanna back. Ereshkigal agrees to it on the condition that somebody comes to the underworld to take her place. So Inanna comes back and finds that, everybody's been mourning her, except for her husband, who, Demuzi, who has been enjoying the company of others. So Enon, in a rage, decides, okay, he can take my place in the underworld. So off he goes to spend eternity in the underworld. I really love that story. I'm also quite fond of the Hyacinthus myth between Apollo, Hyacinthus, and Zephyrus. That was one of my favorites. Prompt number 6. Margaret Atwood's most well-known novel is The Okay, let's retry that. Margaret Atwood's most well-known novel is The Handmaid's Tale. Unfortunately, it is a steaming pile of poop, and I would much rather her most well-known novel be The Robber Bride, which is like the only novel of Margaret Atwood's I actually like. I've tried, I didn't even make it 2 pages but into The Handmaid's Tale. It's just horrendous. Anyway, what's the actual prompt? What is a task or chore you wish you had a maid or servant for? Generally cleaning the bathroom. That is one thing I hate doing. I absolutely hate cleaning the bathroom. Prompt number 7. The themes Margaret Atwood writes about have stayed consistent in all her writing for over 6 decades. She writes about the role of men and women in society, relationships, religion, marriage, and identity, to name a few. If Atwood were to write a novel about you, what are some themes she would need to include? Probably frustration, desperation, that kind of thing. Yeah. I think that would be about it. I mean, because obviously when writing a novel about somebody else's life, you're going to you're going to accentuate it. You're going to enhance it. You're going to exaggerate it. So, yeah. I think, frustration, desperation would definitely be themes that Atwood would have to add if, for whatever reason, she decided to write a novel somehow or other inspired by her life. Prompt number 8. Margaret Atwood has created words for her novels. She has talked about how this makes it difficult for translators of her work. Do you have a favorite word? Why is it your favorite word? I don't think I really have a favorite word. Thinking about it, nothing really jumps out to me as a favorite word, so I guess I'll have to punt on this one. Prompt number 9. Margaret Atwood was born in Canada and lives in Canada now, but she has also lived in other countries like the United States, England, France, Germany, and Scotland. What countries have you lived in, and or what is another country you would like to live in? Okay, so as far as the have I ever lived in another country, the answer is just no. I've only ever lived in the United States, and except for a brief sojourn in San Francisco, I've only ever lived in Texas. Now, as far as country I would love to live in other than the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, I think I would like to live there. Maybe Germany, Italy. I'm not entirely sure about Greece. And I often thought when I was younger to do the JET program and spend a few years in Japan, but I never got around to doing that. So I think those would be the countries, and also Canada. I also would like to live in Canada too. So those would be my answers. The United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Germany, Italy, also France. I think France in two. Spain, uh, maybe, no, I don't know, and Japan. So quite a few countries. Probably more if I kind of got around to thinking about them. So, uh, prompt number 10. Margaret Atwood is an advocate for caring for the earth. What is something you do to help take care of our planet? I don't drive. I've never driven. So if I ever go anywhere, I mean, I prefer walking to it, which would necessitate living in a city. When I lived in Austin on my own, I lived near enough to an HEB, the regional grocery chain, that I could go and get groceries and walk back. And the longer I lived in Austin, the more I walked, to the point where I think shortly before I graduated, I was pretty much walking everywhere. I very rarely used the bus for anything, and I absolutely loved it. It was great. And if I had to go anywhere before then, I took the bus. And also, when I was in San Francisco briefly, I walked everywhere, or except for like to campus. I took the train there. So that was pretty much how I did my this walking. I also try to recycle, but the living in apartments and stuff like that, they're not. They don't really provide opportunities within the complex to recycle, and it's difficult finding like recycling resources locally, which drives me up a wall. But anyway, that's a rant for another day. Prompt number 11. Margaret Atwood is passionate about animal rights, and some of her writing has included animals and reflections on animals. What is a topic that you are passionate about? I think education. If anything, I think education and education reform is, I think, one of my passions. Although I think I come at education reform from a different angle than a lot of reformers do. I utterly detest the tendency to treat education reform as merely a means of building workers. I think education should be more about educating citizens, and the work part will attend to itself. I think we are far too obsessed with work and with only working that it's toxic. Well, one of many toxic issues that I think 21st century has to deal with. Other things I'm passionate about are reading my books. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on to prompt number 12. Margaret Atwood is supportive of new authors in a variety of ways. Who is a new author and or what debut novel do you wish more people knew about? Okay, so this is a bit tricky because if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you will know for the first few months of my channel, I had a great relationship with fiction. And then 2020 happened, and for the past 2 years, I've really struggled with fiction. It is incredibly rare for me to enjoy a work of fiction. Accepting rereads of books that I've loved, I've never really had, so much luck. So, a new author, can't really think of one. And a debut novel, again, I can't think of one, so I'm going to have to punt on this. And if you would like to do the second series of Tag, then I will see you tomorrow with another video, book tips. So until then, thank you, have a good afternoon, and stay safe.